Your position, however, what you're saying now on this podcast, obviously I haven't listened to all your shows. I've seen many of your things online, but I haven't listened to, I quite honestly, I don't think I've ever listened to any of your positions on defooing with your family. I think everything I've gotten
I don't talk about it that much.
Everything I've gotten from is just communicating with you and then reading the criticisms of it. But your position on this podcast, I think, is very difficult to argue. I think it's very reasonable. It's very...
And if I've done wrong, if people can tell me. But then the problem is it has to go to everyone then. I can't slice and dice ethics. I'm so sorry, Joe. I was just... I've never really had a chance to talk about this kind of stuff, and I don't really address it, but I'm excited to be able to.
I'm glad we're talking about it because I think it's important sometimes to give people an opportunity. Like I've had people email me like, "Why are you friends with Stefan Molyneux? That guy's a dick." And I'm like Peter Joseph, fucking very upset at you. Peter Joseph, the Zeitgeist guy.
Yeah. P-Joe.
Yeah, I like that guy. I think he's got some great ideas, but he was very upset with you as well. But whatever, that's not important. I think that it's important to have these kind of conversations. I think I need to have them too with people too, where I go over my own ideas. You know, when you have someone disagree with you, where you get a chance to look at your position from a different angle as well, and look at the perceptions of your positions. You know, one of your positions that get criticized, or one of the other things that gets tossed at you, is the term misogynist, and I'm sure that's that's upsetting to you as well, right? You're not a misogynist, are you?
I don't even, like, if people could define to me what that, if it means general hatred of all women, then I made a really bad choice of who to get married to.
Isn't it interesting, though, that that's what a misogynist means? It's like, if you criticize anyone who's gay, you're a homophobe. If you have issue with someone who's black, who does something stupid like Al Sharpton, you're a racist. Yeah. You know, it's a cute way of dismembering your argument or dismembering your position right away. But you said some stuff about women that I have even disagreed with. And one of them, you did this thing recently where you're talking about how the way to get assholes out of society, it's women's responsibility, because women are breeding with these assholes and they're making assholes. It's
not only women's responsibility, but it's a key part of the equation that I think is not discussed enough, which is the sexual choices of women.
That expression, or that sentence is really critical. It's not only women's responsibility, but in what I saw, the thing that you went off on, you were talking, I think it was the Elliot Rodgers thing, is that what it was? Where you're talking about that fucking crazy kid up in Santa Barbara that killed everybody?
Yeah.
By the way, he killed more men than he did women. It's one of the things that I found fascinating, that this whole yes all women, hashtag yes all women thing came out after 4 men were murdered and 2 women. Yeah. And that guy was a piece of shit, regardless of gender. Gender had very little to do. He was mad at the men that women found attractive. This is it's not an even game, this life. You know, there's people that were born and they look like Beyonce. And then there's people that are born that look like Bridget the Midget. And, you know,
I don't even know who that is. Who's that?
Beyonce or Bridget the Midget?
The second one,
How dare you pretend you don't know who that is? She's a porn star.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, she's a small person porn star.
All right.
My point being, you know, it's not like you earned being Beyonce's looks. You know, no one earned that. No one worked really hard. She might have worked really hard to get that body, but she's a beautiful person. She was born extremely physically attractive. And if you're
the singing voice.
Yes.
I mean, you know, I could practice forever. I could sound like that.
And this Elliot Rodger guy was he was socially awkward and probably mentally, there was something wrong with him. Asperger's, whatever the fuck it was. I don't know what was wrong with him, but if you watch his videos where he's talking, there's clearly some sort of a weird social disconnect. He had a really hard time connecting with people and couldn't get a woman to like him for various reasons. Blame them for his hate and his feeling. When people when they look around, they see all these people that are attractive. They see all these people that are attracted to each other, and then they're left out of that. They're frustrated. They're angry. It drives them fucking crazy. And I think that's where this Elliot Rodgers guy fit in. And when this yes all women thing came about, on one hand, I agree with it. It's got to be way more difficult to be a woman, way more difficult to constantly worry about your own physical safety, worry about men wanting to sexually assault you, which is very rare for a man to fear. I mean, maybe in prison, yeah, but in real life, it's very rare for men to worry about other men physically, sexually abusing them or wanting to get them somewhere, roofie them up and sexually abuse them. But for women, it's a super common occurrence. So women in bars are always worried about covering their drink. I've talked to at least 5 women over the course of my life that believe or were definitely roofied.
Wow.
Or were definitely drugged by someone with, unknown drug. They woke up in someone's hotel room. It's disgusting and evil and creepy, and it's something that men don't have to worry about, but women do. But when a guy like that comes along, I think it's not a matter of it's a matter of a mental illness is what it is. I mean, that guy was a mentally ill person. I don't know what causes a person like that to be mentally ill, but I don't think that women can prevent that by not breeding. I don't think that women can prevent a guy like that from being born. I mean, I don't think his parents were abusive. I've never read anything that said that his parents did anything evil to him. So how does an evil guy like that come about? He's mentally ill. Something happened during his childhood. And I don't think anybody could have prevented that by being a woman, not allowing him to have sex with them or whatever, what you were talking about. I think, especially in this particular example, that guy was sick. There's something wrong with him. There's sick people all the time. You can go down the street and there's a guy that pushes his car to talks to himself, and I don't think it's because no one fucked him. I think that guy's got something wrong. There's an issue there. And I think that was what this Elliot Rodger guy, there's an issue with him. That guy was a monster. That guy was an asshole, and it's no woman's fault.
Well, okay, so let's pull back from Elliot Rodger because we don't know much about his childhood. We know that he had some complaints about the way his stepmom treated him, but I went over that in the video. So a study came out recently, and again, I had the guy on my show to talk about it. And what he did was he went to a sort of middle-class neighborhood and went to a daycare, and he said to the women, listen, I really want to study aggression, yelling, whatever, in families. I need you to wear this recorder for, I don't know, a week or 10 days or whatever it was. And so he had the women wear this recorder, and then he got the footage back, or the audio back. And he found that the women were hitting the children a lot. A lot, like 936 times a year, an average of 3 times a day from 16 months to 4 years of age.
Where was this study? Where was it taking place?
I can't remember where, but it was
city.
I'll give you the link for maybe Mike can dig it up. I'll give you the link for the show. 936 times.
How many people were involved in the study?
I think 40 or so. So it's not comprehensive, but this is a middle-class neighborhood. So this isn't even poor, right?
40 is a pretty good number. And out of those 40 people, what percentage of them were hitting their kids?
I think all but 2. And the other 2 were verbally aggressive.
Whoa.
So the idea that women are not part of the cycle of violence, to me, seems... and again, this doesn't explain Elliot Rodger, of course, but the reality is that women... and men too, like, again, and not all women, right? My wife is an incredible mom. But there is a lot of aggression coming from women towards children. Now, it's funny because when I talk about this kind of stuff, people will say, well, what about men? It's like, but we know about men. We need to look at the stuff that's not seen, right? Because right now it's like, like it's just men are nasty and men need to change. Yes, men need to change. Absolutely. Of course, men need to change. But saying that women are not part of the cycle of violence is not correct with the data. And I am committed against all calumny, against all insults, against all hates and trolls. I am committed to doing everything I can to maximize peace in the world. I know that sounds like crappy and diluted and all that, but that is my commitment, in life. And if we can get women to stop hitting children, the world will become a much more peaceful place. If we can get men to stop hitting children, absolutely. But male aggression has already been focused on so much that there is this blind spot, which is the degree to which women use aggression in the raising of children. 80% of British mothers spank their child before the child is 1 year old.
Wow.
I mean, it's mad. How this kind of, and those of us who have great wives and peaceful girlfriends and all that, there is a whole world out there of people who, and men and women, but again, we've talked about the men a lot. Focus on the women.
That is very different than what we're talking about. you know, what we're talking about is horrific. You know, we're talking about is just that's anytime you're hitting a fucking baby, that's sick. I mean, the fact that so many people do it is really hard to believe. I don't have any access to any statistics, and I believe you. I'm not.
Well,
saying
again,
that
people can look. I grilled the guy on my show, and so people can listen to it. But Mike's going to put it out on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Stefan Molyneux. Yeah, people can look at the study, and this is
I'll
lots of studies
retweet
around
that
this.
study. I'll retweet that study because that's incredibly disturbing. And when kids, the issue, of course, is that when kids are hit by their loved ones, they are way more likely to hit their loved ones. They're way more likely to accept violence. Some of the scariest kids are kids that were abused at home. I mean, I remember growing up with this kid that was abused at home, and he was so quick to violence. And it's super. We find it in the UFC as well. Some of the best fighters were bullied when they were younger. They were beaten up by their brothers. Some of the scariest guys are guys who had older brothers who used to kick their asses because they get used to having that from their family and their loved ones, and they have a certain tolerance to violence and a certain tolerance to aggression that other folks don't have.
Yeah.
They have a peace with it. You know, so they're not as afraid of fighting. They're not as afraid of competition as the other folks are. And yeah, that's a terrible cycle to be a part of. And those numbers are absolutely incredibly disturbing. But that's not exactly what I had read. What I had read, where you were essentially talking about women's attraction to assholes, and that this was the cause of their being more assholes. And if women just stood up and said they're not going to be with assholes anymore, we wouldn't have any assholes in the world. And I just don't.
Well, look, I mean, when it's stated as a complete and isolated absolute, I get that it sounds deranged, right?
Right.
And I've certainly held men's feet to the fire as far as aggression and violence goes as well. And I've talked to dads not to hit their kids and all that. So I'm not saying, well, no, I don't need to talk to you. You're the dad. Let me talk to the only person who is ever aggressive to children, which must be the woman. But the reality is, I think, and I think this is, somewhat debatable. I think it's fairly well established that in general, men ask women out and women say yes or no. That's generally how it works. And there are exceptions and all that, right? But in studies I've read, about 90% of dates are initiated by men. And so women are doing the choosing. And I'm saying to women, one of the ways that women can incredibly contribute to reducing the cycle of violence is to choose better men. Because there's a part of women, and again, this is fairly well established, at least as well as these things can be established, there's a part of women that likes the alpha guy, right? The guy who's kind of cold and efficient, and I mean, I'm plowing my way through 50 Shades of Grey. God help me.
How dare you?
How
dare you even know it?
I'm telling you. I'm sorry. She's not a midget porn star, but I guess this is all I got, right? But and I get that. I mean, men are attracted to particular physical things which indicate fertility, and women are attracted to particular male traits that indicate good provider. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's perfectly natural. But the reality is that we do need to be wise in who we choose to raise our kids with and who we choose to have kids with. And I berate men all the time for choosing looks over virtue. I mean, on my show, I'm horrendous on men for choosing looks over virtue. And we've all been there, we've all done it, and we all know what a mistake that is, right? What is it that someone says? I don't care how good looking she is, there's some guy out there who's tired of screwing her, right? And so I talk to men about don't just, go for virtue. Virtue is the big tits of philosophy, right? I mean, that's what you want to go for when you're going to get married. And for women, I say the same thing, go for virtue. But I think men's tendency to choose on shallow standards is fairly well known. And again, I'm just trying to sort of shine the light on that other side and say, look, if you need to sort of cross your legs and grit your teeth and say, he may be sexy, but he's not a good guy. I'm not going to have kids with him. And I think that will help a lot. I mean, I want to empower women to be not to be victims alone, right? I mean, I'm trying to empower. Once you give people, if you say, look, women are part of the cycle of violence, then women aren't helpless and just need to sit on their knees and beg men not to be violent. Women can actually talk amongst themselves and be empowered to do things to help reduce the prevalence of violence in society. Choose better men. Don't punish your kids. Don't yell at them. Don't hit at them. Reason with them. That gives women something to do rather than cross their fingers and hope that men get better.
You also did this thing on Robin Williams.